Welcome to the High Performance Hockey Podcast. Today we're joined by strength and conditioning coach for Ak Bars Kazan in the KHL, Brandon Bovee. Brandon is a 12-year KHL strength and conditioning veteran, two-time Gagarin Cup winner, two-time runner-up, and he's originally from Dana Point, California. He's coached all over from Moscow to the Far East in Vladivostok. Really interesting conversation that we can all pull regardless of if you're a seasoned strength and conditioning coach or a newbie in this field. His journey is very unique. He went literally from North America all the way to the Eastern Bloc. We talk about the differences in culture. We talk about the differences in gameplay, structure. We talk about performance in the KHL, the difference in schedule, his reliance or lack of reliance on technology. And he talked about the need of buy-in and building trust and communication and how that may be the most important of all. It's a fantastic conversation. Welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the podcast, Brandon. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Anthony.
I think it was the year 2017 where I officially shook your hand. I think it was 2017, maybe it was 2016, NSCA Coaches Hockey Conference with a bunch of awesome hockey people. But really excited. You got a super unique background. And I want to go into that. You spent time in North America. You spent time in Europe. Let's start by where you're currently at. Let the listeners know who you work for. And then I guess on a piggyback is how the hell did you get there?
Okay. So the team that I'm currently with is hockey club Ak Bars Kazan. Ak Bars is when you translate into the local language, it means it's like a snow leopard. It's like a white cat. So that's our team logo. Kazan is located about 800 kilometers northeast of Moscow. It's about an hour 15 flight from Moscow. And so that's where I'm currently at. I'm on my second stint here. I was here for 2 years before that, in 2016 to 2018. And then I left and I went and worked for another team, Avant-Garde Omsk, for 5 years. And then I just returned back to here this year. How I ended up over here was, so in 2011, I was working in the private sector in Newport. So I'm from California. I'm from Southern California, South Orange County. I was working in the private sector for a facility, a private training facility there in Newport Beach. And every summer we'd have the owner of the gym, his nephew was playing for the NTDP program, Red Rakshan. And he would come back every summer, and him and his local hockey buddies would train with us. And I just took a liking to them. I was a former wrestler, and I was training a lot of MMA guys at the time. And I just kind of took a liking to working with hockey guys. And I was kind of like at a point in my life where I didn't kind of know which direction I wanted to kind of go. Was I going to stay the private route or whatnot? I ended up reaching out to Sean Scahan with the Anaheim Ducks and did an internship with Sean that season. And that summer he asked me, "Hey, you interested in helping me with my summer program?" So I said, "Yeah, why not?" I didn't really know. I was like still kind of like working odd jobs here and there, trying to make ends meet. And that year, the pro guys were starting I think at 8 or 8:30, and he had one guy, Ruslan Saleh, who had to take his kids to school, so he wanted to start a little bit later than the other guys. So Sean asked me, "Hey, I'm going to start with the pro guys. Can you take Rusty and work with him?" And I said, "Why not?" So Rusty and I clicked right from the get-go. He had just finished his season in Detroit, and he had signed with Lokomotiv Yaroslavl in Russia. And one day he just walked in and he said, "Hey, Brandon, are you interested in going to Russia?" And I said, "Yeah, what do you mean?" I thought he was half kidding, and he was being serious. And so he said, I just signed in Lokomotiv. I'm going to try to get you there with me." So luckily for me, they had signed a guy a week earlier than that, a strength coach.
Okay.
So then Ruslan called me back and said, "Hey, I can't get you to Lokomotiv, but I'm from Minsk, Belarus. There's a team in Minsk, Dynamo. If you're interested, I know the owner, I know the big boss." So he called the big boss. They were interested. He called me back a few days later. He said, "Hey, Brandon, what's it going to take to get you out there?" So I gave him a number. I think he was in Las Vegas at the time. He called, so he was coming back, he was driving back, and he calls me and goes, "Hey, Brandon, they're interested in you. They accepted your offer. You got to buy a plane ticket. You got to be out there in 2 weeks."
Oh my goodness.
So this was like around the end of, like around the middle of June or something. And I needed to be there, I think around like the 10th or something of July. Ran it over with my parents. They're like, go, go, go. Like, don't hesitate. Like, go. It's like I was 30 years old. I wasn't married. I had no kids. Like I was kind of just like not knowing what to do. And Sean told me, like, hey, Brandon, like you can trust Rusty. His word is like gold. He would never like put you in a bad situation. So I borrowed money to get a plane ticket. I came out to Belarus with $250 in my bank account. I had to borrow money to get my visa to come over. I had to borrow money for the plane ticket. So I came over for 2 weeks on a tryout contract, and I didn't know what to do with my like personal belongings back home because I didn't know if they were going to keep me. There were so many unknowns. So a lot of teams in Russia, they'll go, their preseasons are usually about anywhere from like 4 to 8 weeks long. Before they would usually go to like Finland or Switzerland for small training camps. So came out on a 2 week contract. We were in Switzerland doing a mini, like I think we were there for 10 days training camp in Les Vallées des Joux, which is near on the French side of Switzerland. So they said, like, we want to keep you for the season. We're going to resign you for the season. So I flew home from Switzerland, packed up all my stuff, came back. When I landed in Minsk, I actually ran into Rusty in the airport. He was in Minsk going to visit his family, and he was flying back to Yaroslavl, and then whole September tragedy, it was the last time. So my mistake, it was, I think, September 7th. I mixed up the
Yeah,
dates.
terrible, terrible, terrible in the hockey world and all over the world. And just thinking about your story though is just puts so much perspective. Number one, thanks for sharing that. That's pretty awesome. And I can tell you, I can relate to it in a different way. And then I think it's interesting for young coaches. I can tell you from me, from my hockey experience, not strength coach. I remember not having a very illustrious college career, and I remember getting a call from a coach and saying, "Hey, listen, we need you 1,200 miles away. I can't guarantee anything. And you know what? You're going to get an opportunity. Let's see what you got, kid." And not that I had some storied professional hockey career afterwards, but that idea of like, hey, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm gonna go, or I'm gonna take that opportunity, that risk. It might pay off in massive heaps. Parlaying that to young strength coaches now, though, I think that's important as well, right? Like this idea of like, hey, you know what? You might be working for, a free internship, or you might not know what's going to happen, but make the big time where you're at right now and see how you can parlay that into what you do in the future. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Walk me through the formative years. Like when you started, was it a massive culture shock? Like you didn't speak the language. You said you had $250 to your name. Like, how did you even start the process of building buy-in in a foreign country in a language that you don't speak?
Unbeknownst to me, Anthony, like signing in Minsk as my first team when I came over, it was a blessing in disguise because back then, any team, well, it's still the same way. Any team outside of Russia is allowed as many imports as they want. So I walked into a situation where half the team spoke English.
Ah,
I mean, we had guys from Czech, we had guys from Finland, we had guys from Sweden. So that really worked itself out. And the team had provided me with a translator. So ended up having a translator my first 2 seasons in Minsk.
great.
Tashi McCray. So he had played in Germany before. And so but going back, yeah, it was a huge culture shock for me. Like I remember it was just, because you hear all these stories. And then when I got here, it was like totally different.
Yep.
Facilities were awesome. I mean, we had a great setup. The gym was great. I mean, Peter Twisted actually spoke out there a few years before that in men and had sold a bunch of equipment to them, so a lot of his twist equipment. So I walked into the stockpile. There was everything that I really needed, and it was really like blessing in disguise, like the situation that I was first put into when I first came over.
What were some early, like, was there any, the first 2 years of you coaching abroad, were there any big aha moments, like comparative to the North American style, whether it be coaching, strength and conditioning, or just customs that were just like, whoa, this is eye-opening to me?
The biggest thing that was hard for me was like people didn't smile a lot. Like that was like really like tough for me. I'd go to the store and I'd try to be friendly and stuff like and try to smile and they would just kind of like, but then I just kind of understood that that's the culture over here. And that was kind of the big one for me when I first came over.
You've worked in Russia, KHL. You worked in Prague. You've worked in North America. What is I know compare the high performance model if you're able to in North America to something that you'd see in the KHL. Is it very similar? For example, do you have the director of sports performance, head strength and conditioning coach, physical therapist, PTs, ATs, doctors like you would in North America? How does it work in the KHL based on your experiences?
It's totally different than North America in that you simply don't have the personnel. 10 out of my 12 seasons over here, I've worked alone. I've had an assistant for 2 seasons, only out of 12 seasons over here. But usually in a team over here, the kind of the way it is, there's usually two doctors. If you're lucky, you're gonna have one physical therapist on staff or like a rehab guy. If you're lucky. Um, Normally they don't have athletic trainers here. They have massage guys, and there's probably usually about the 3 to 4 on a team. I mean, there's no such thing as interns here. I mean, there's none of that kind of stuff. There's no like sports science departments here yet.
Sure. You think that's going to change? Let me contrast that. Obviously, you'll speak to a National Hockey League strength coach or coaches in North American college coaches, right? Obviously, there's a swing now in North America to objective information, technology, data analyzation. Are you a one-man show with that? I guess maybe a better question is, A, do you use data to make decisions? B, I'm guessing if you're the only person on board, you're also taking the time to analyze that after the fact and then be able to work it in your system to make it more efficient.
I use some technology, first beat heart rate monitoring system we have. In the past, when I was in Omsk, we had 1 year I was able to so they have Catapult here, and I used that for a full season.
You said five units, 5 catapult units?
5 units, yeah, we had
Yep.
5 units.
Okay.
So it was a hard sell to get 30 units up front. So I
Sure.
had to start. It's hard when you're a one-man show trying to do everything. Johnny A forgot his heart rate monitor this practice. It's just you're constantly trying to.
But you know what? This is again from an outsider looking in. I think it also enriches you as a coach too, man. I call it being a Swiss Army knife. I mean, you're able to do number one, communicate with the players, provide the strength and conditioning. If you are procuring technology, you've built that built-in relationship. It's an easier communication. It's an easier sell. To be able to do all that, to me, is a special experience. I know at times it might seem overwhelming, but to be able to do that, do you feel that way? Like with all the responsibilities that are tagged along under your name?
Yeah, of course, and that's the kind of the why they use the term over here. Like, so they don't use strength and conditioning coach over here. It's you're a coach of physical preparation. Like when you
Wow.
translate it in Russian to
Yep.
English, it's you're a coach of physical preparation. I think when you have that general ability to like you wear so many different hats, you're able to know where to look at when you need to find specific solutions to specific problems.
Today's episode has been brought to you by Physical Preparation for Ice Hockey, Biological Principles and Practical Solutions, and the Gain Go Grow Manual. This is a 2-part book series exploring training the intermediate and advanced level players. Book number 1 explores training the intermediate player. Chapters include long-term athletic development, considerations, speed training, power training, strength training, and program design. The Gain Go Grow Manual explores training the high-performance hockey player. Chapters include biomechanics of ice hockey, considerations for high performers, minimizing adaptational risks while upsizing gains, the Gain Go Grow model, and example microcycles. More information can be found at Amazon.com. Question for you, speaking about that. I'm just going all over the place. We have a list of questions. This conversation is going all over the place, and that's fine. I like it because this is really interesting to me. So you mentioned about physical preparation. I can tell you, you know, you and I are roughly the same age. I'm probably a little older, probably have some more gray hairs, but we were all, when we first started in this strength and conditioning, we're always so the Russian textbooks, the Olympic lifting textbooks, you know, the Asurins, the Zazorskis, etc. I look at the hockey side of that, and I look at the name that always would come up to me, right? Tarasov, the father of Russian hockey, Tretiak, Federer. I mean, there's a lot of who was the other National League coach for so many years, the one that was really hard on his team, that won many golds. I forget. It wasn't Tarasov. Thank you, Tikhonov. Yeah. How attuned right now currently are those historical figures in Russia from a hockey standpoint? Are they still brought up by some of the players? Are they still, some of the lessons still preached?
So famous over here. I mean, it's, oh yeah.
Big time, right?
Oh, big time. Yeah. Prestiged.
Educate us too in the audience from in terms of the playing style. Compare and contrast that to the North American style or the KHL. Is it more flow, more high-end skill? How does that game work? Or is it very similar?
I guess it depends on the coach and their style of play that they want to play. You know, like I worked for a North American coach over here that played a very a north-south game, you know, and so I have other coaches where before, when the rinks were bigger, we played more like a neutral zone gap types, like more kind of look for counterattacks and stuff like that. But now the rink sizes they're going, most of them in the league, it's kind of hard to keep track because they're always changing. But most are now down to, I think, it's the finish size. I'm not quite sure the dimensions because each, like, a handful of them are one size, some handful are another size. So
they used to play in the KHL in bigger rinks, right? 200 by 85 foot, but bigger at one point, correct? In the KHL, and they're shrinking that now.
There's they're changing them out.
And then walk us through as well. We're asking about playing styles. Walk us through a schedule. What does an aggregate look like? 82 game schedule in National League, KHL. What's the game schedule typically?
So, Anthony, I have it right here. I went back to the 12 years that I've been over here. When we first started, Anthony, we were playing 54. We had a 54 game regular season schedule.
Wow.
But mind you that we have usually anywhere from 6 to 8 week training camp, and usually you'll play 2 tournaments during that time. So that's another 8 to 10 games.
Wow.
Then before, we used to always have the IIHF national team breaks for the Euro Hockey Tour. So, and a lot of your import guys would go play for their respective countries, Sweden, Finland, Russia, or the Czech Republic. So those guys were getting another, you know, depending on how many times I get called up to the national team, that could be anywhere from another, like maybe 3 to 10 games. So when we first started, we were at 54. Now we're up to 68. This last year, we had a 68 regular game schedule. And next year, I just got word next year, they're going to start training camp a little bit later, and they're going to extend the season, I think, a month. So I'm interested to see how many games we'll play with that. They're trying to shorten down the training camp window.
How does that work for you as a performance coach, as a physical preparation coach? What's a typical week look like for you during the season? How many times are you able to work out with the guys? And then don't want to throw too many questions at you at once, but are you more of a person that likes to get those scheduled workouts in on off days or right after games?
Anthony, it really depends on our schedule. Whether we're at home or on the road. I would say a majority of my lifts are post game, depending on the schedule, depending on where we're traveling, depending on what our wins and loss record is. You know, there's a lot of factors that go into that, but usually it's after games.
And so you're looking at it from a standpoint, like if you just curious how you schedule this. Is it one of those deals where you're looking at it when you get the season schedule and break that into smaller chunks? Or are you kind of going week by week, just looking at the ebbs and flows of the season?
Usually week by week, Anthony, because a lot of times I'm not, and this is not a knock on any coach. Sometimes I don't know our plan for the month.
Yeah, I gotcha. Yeah.
you know. Some coaches are reactive and some are proactive,
Sure.
and so when you have a proactive coach, it's a little bit easier. When you have a reactive coach, you kind of gotta sometimes maybe err on the side of not doing too much because you don't know what he's thinking.
Yep. Yep. And then how would you say, again, from your experience here as an aggregate, when you look at this style, let's just take your experience. I don't mean just this year. Let's just look at your experience in Russia, period. If you were to walk in day one to a gym in Russia when you first got here and compare and contrast that with what individuals would be doing in a North American gym, would that be similar or is it way different?
Can see a lot of North American trends coming through here. I can say that we're, in terms of strength and conditioning, I think we're way ahead of the curve in North
Great.
America.
Okay.
Um, and I think a lot of those trends are trickling down into here now. But when I first came up, like our strength and conditioning is way ahead of what I've seen over here.
Okay. And through your contracts within Russia, are you able to do anything off season with the guys, or is when the season ends, essentially, I go home, I recalibrate, and then I'm back in for the regular season?
I go home, I recalibrate, and I'll send a program out on Team Builder with the guys, and so our guys are all over the place. Some are in Moscow, some are in St. Petersburg, some are in Chelyabinsk, some are in Yekaterinburg, some are in Khabarovsk. I've got guys all over. So I try to find the guys that I can recommend, like in Moscow and St. Petersburg, that they can go see if they want. A lot of guys will leave the country. They'll go travel, and so yeah, I set them up with a program on Team Builder, but I can't really like force it.
Yep. Told you I'm throwing out questions all over you, and they're no particular order, completely off the cuff. Your experience in Europe, any coaches that have really stood out to you that have been mentors? If so, who are they? And then perhaps maybe one or two lessons that you learned that, hey, this was an unbelievable learning experience. Any individuals, whether they're head coaches, strength coaches, ATs, that you said, hey, Anth, this guy or girl was just super, super instrumental and taught me some valuable insight.
I worked 4 years with Bob Hartley. I know he gets a
Yeah.
bad rap with a lot of guys,
Yep.
but he taught me the importance of details and being prepared, and teaching is and coaching is teaching. I mean, yeah, it was unbelievable 4 years with Bob. I know he's a really hard, and I know he's a tough coach, but it was an unbelievable experience with for me to work with him. Unbelievable. I want him so passionate and detail oriented.
Coached in Atlanta for a while. Actually, my brother Misha worked with him on a couple assignments when he was in Atlanta. And then he went, where was he after the National League? He was one other place, and then he,
He was in Switzerland and Zurich. Then he came back to the NHL. Then he went to Team Latvia, and then he came to Russia. He was 4 years in Russia, and first year we were in the finals together. Second year we lost first round. Third year we won a cup, and the fourth year we lost in the second round. So yeah, it was an unbelievable experience yeah, I learned so much from him just on the coaching side of stuff and how to read players and how to get buy-in. It was unbelievable.
you look at the NHL, right? You've got the Strength and Conditioning Association of Professional Hockey. You got tight, close knit colleagues, right? Whether it's Canada, U.S. Do you see that in Europe in the KHL? Are there any North American strength and conditioning coaches that you know in that league, or are you the only one?
No, you know what, Anthony? So when I first came over, it was me and Barry Brennan. Barry was in
Oh
Atlanta.
yeah, he's Brendan
Yeah, Barry was over.
Blue Jackets, right?
Yeah. So Barry, when I first came over, he was here, and then Barry was in Seiska. When he was in Seiska, he brought a guy in from Ottawa, Hassan Saeed, who was working with the junior program. Barry left and went back to Canada, I think, and Hassan stayed. Hassan's still here. He's working for Seiska. So Hassan has been over here probably. I've been here 12 years. I want to say he's been here probably 8 or 9, maybe 10 seasons. Hassan has been here, and then Steve Nightingale was here in
Oh,
Kunlun
that's
for a
right. I
year.
knew that. Yep.
Yeah, so Steve was here for a year. During when Steve was here, we had a great little group chat with all the strength coaches. Steve was really trying to like make a kind of like a professional organization, trying to organize things for when visiting teams came. He was doing a really good job, but then he left. And then actually, he's finished. Matthias Sarvella,
Yes. I
I butchered your last name. So Matthias was over here for how many years? He was over here for maybe I want to say 5 or 6 years.
a friend of mine on social media, really good guy, and
Yeah,
obviously,
very smart. You got to get him on the podcast. He's brilliant.
okay. I had Stephen Nightingale on, super brilliant guy too. So I will
That's a
get.
great guy. Yeah, you got to get Matthias on. A really good guy, really bright guy, bright young guy, passionate, super passionate.
So there have been other North Americans. There have been others, obviously, aside from Russia, but no group, like no strength and conditioning association of perfect, nothing like that.
Not that I know of.
Look, rewind your career back now. What advice would you give a young strength coach? Right, you're. Let's talk. A recent grad. They too have had their time in North America. Maybe it's a private facility like ours. Maybe it's a college, and they're considering Europe. What advice would you give them about that journey?
I mean, it takes a certain kind of personality to come over here. I mean, if you're super rigid, I don't think you would do too well. But I would highly recommend it. Like I've enjoyed it, but I have a certain personality where I'm like, I can, I'm pretty easygoing,
Yep.
and I try to not look at things as bad or good, but just different. Just things are different. So I wrote down here when you said, "What is your advice for young coaches?" Ready, fire, aim.
Yep. And I think too, I can't say I know you as well as a lot of other colleagues that have had the opportunity to hang out with you, but I can tell you one thing I do notice about you that I think allows you to do what you do and do it well is you're a good people person. I think that we realize, at least I can speak for myself. I'm 25 years in this career now. If you're not able to deal with people and become friends and build a relationship with people, you can be the smartest guy in the room, but you got to be able to feel like you're part of something, have the players trust you. And I know that might sound like low hanging fruit, but it's not to me. That might be the most important. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what Bob always told me. The players should want to be around you.
Yeah,
He's always telling me that players should want to be around you.
that's right. I say this too, and I've said it on podcasts before, and I say it a lot. I think great coaches are a lot like gardeners. Gardeners don't grow flowers; they create an environment for flowers to grow. And if we can create that environment, I think that's a special thing. And I think in that particular situation, whether you're coming to a new country, a totally new land, uh, you know, getting a chance to know people first, that certainly helps in trying to get a message across down the road. Make sense?
Yeah, yeah, of course.
Any other? We talked about Tarasov. We talked about his methods. We talked about Tikhonov. Any other, Russians that have been really really popular and that have had a trickle down effect into everyday life in terms of the organizations in the KHL or who you've had a chance to learn from?
Mm.
Tretiak, is he still a vocal presence?
Yeah, he's the head of the federation. He's the
Wow.
head of the
And
federation. Yeah.
Fedorov was coaching, right? He was coaching,
But
correct?
Fedorov was the head coach in CSKA with where Hassan is, where Barry was before. Um, so yeah, he was there the last 3 years. They actually just announced that they're not going to renew his contract. So he was there the last 3 years. They won the cup the last first 2 years he was there. They won the cup with him.
Larionov, is he back in?
Larionov's coaching in Torpedo Nizhny Novgorod. So yeah.
Hey man, I gotta have my. Hey, these guys were.
Larionov's coaching Slava Kozlov. He is an
Yes.
assistant coach at Dynamo Moscow. I worked one season with him.
Kozlov, correct me if I'm wrong on that. Kozlov played for the Thrashers. He was with who's the Russian, who's playing the KHL now, big goal scorer.
Kovalchuk.
Thank you,
Kovalchuk.
Kovalchuk. Yep. Wow, got some firepower there, eh?
Well, he's still playing. He's
I
playing
know.
for Spartak. He's still playing.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, coaching tree. Yeah, Igor's in.
What does the future hold for you? Are you going to be resigning next year? What are your thoughts? How long do you want this to? Is this something where you feel you're going to work here until you retire and until you and then
Go year
possibly
by year,
stay?
Anthony, because
Just like the plan, baby, right? Just like the training plan.
yeah, year by year. Because uh, I always, my folks are getting a little bit older, and it's kind of hard to be away from them. My wife and daughter are in Cali right now, so because she needs to be there 6 months out of the year for her green card. So I, I just year by year, I like it over here. My wife likes it over here, so I'm not opposed to being here. Um, but I've got others. My folks are starting to get a little bit older, and they want to be close to their granddaughter. I got another one coming in June.
Hey, congratulations. And I will tell you this too. You know what? I said this the other day. The most important clients you'll ever have are your parents. And I can only tell you, and as we age too, and we talked about young coaches, I can tell you now, not that I feel like I'm some old person, but the older I've gotten, the more my priorities have changed. And our father used to say family, faith, and health. And I like your plans for the future, which are, guess what? I don't know what that's going to be. I'm going to take it year by year and reevaluate. Having said that, I can tell you this: you've got some really, really unique experiences, and we can all learn from those. So I appreciate you sharing that time with us. Where can our listeners find out more about you and what you're doing?
Oh, I don't have a social media present. I mean, I have social media, but I use it more for my own knowledge than I don't post much. I mean, I'm on Instagram. I have Facebook. I try to stay low key on social media. I think there's so much noise out there right now. I don't want to muddy the waters anymore. But
I like even more. I don't disagree with that. That's a whole new conversation, huh?
I mean, there's so much information nowadays. It's like, how do you filter it?
You know, I could go on about this too, and this is a conversation that, yeah, it's a Q and A, but it's more of a conversation at this point. But you know, if 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 most young coaches just realized how monotonous and boring just really good strength and conditioning is,
Oh yeah.
you know, if I were to post videos, no one would, we wouldn't want to watch them, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have written down here like just keep it simple. Don't major in the minors. Keep the main thing the main thing. I see so much guys majoring in the minors. Like you don't have the first 95% correct yet, and you're already looking at the last 5%. It's like, man, there's so much low-hanging fruit that you haven't even grabbed yet. The whoop scores and all this nonsense. It's like get some consistency in your routines. Man, that stuff just snaps my lips. Don't even get me started on that stuff.
I think I need to get you started. I can tell you this. I went through a PhD process, and my supervisor told me this once, and it's so true. He said, you learn more and more about less and less until you know absolutely everything about nothing. And the reality is, it's so interesting, right? I'm pointing my thumb at this sometimes. I said this once before on social media. I truly stand by the statement. 90% of what we see on social media is for 5 or 10% of the population. Simple progression, simple accommodate. There's no fancy. You don't need to hook up the bands and chains. You don't need to hook up the weight releasers. You just need
Yeah.
intent and consistency.
The second word right there. You just need some consistency. That's one of the main things I try to sell my guys on. Just get some consistency in your routines. The best guys, I remember Sean posted something on social media not too long ago about some of the best guys he's worked with that they just had
That's right.
simple things done savagely well.
You know, and I had a conversation. I interviewed him. Was fortunate enough a couple of years ago, Mike Babcock, and he talked about this idea of just embracing the monotony of being a pro. And then you talk to a Hall of Fame strength coach, and you hear the quote from Buddy Morris. He said, "Simple programs work well for beginners and elite athletes but for different reasons." You know, Tommy needs. We can go on and on about this simplicity, but the reality is that doesn't sell sometimes, does it?
No, not in this day and age. And I feel like that's, are we heading in the right direction?
Yeah, and the other thing I talk about, and maybe this is different for you, this is just my narrative, and I do realize too, Brandon, it's coming from my own bias and my own experience, and everyone's experience is different. See, you work in the team environment, and I completely understand. I work in the private environment. It's just we have different constraints, right? But I do see this sometimes, especially with young coaches. Everything now is about what we just talked about, or the latest gadget. You have to have this technology. Do you have this? Did you track this? The reality is, is that even, oh, what are you doing with that? Is it a reliable metric? How does that make your process more efficient? Are you, like you said, majoring in minors? Does it even matter at this point, right? And those aren't easy questions to ask. I would tell you this, as simple as my program has gotten throughout the years, I've taken at least in years past, that same mindset with technology procurement. Now, our budget looks like my hairline. We don't have a budget like the National Hockey League would, but I can tell you, here are our technologies in no particular order. Heart rate monitoring. Why? I think it's important. It helps us gauge internal load during workouts. Position transducers, right? I want to see how fast the bar is moving. We can also use that to look at power output, right? We're lucky enough to have a force plate. We're able to test jumping capabilities, rate of force development. We're able to test isometric mid-thigh pull, and we have lasers for timing. And all of those allow our process to be more efficient without overtaxing the athlete. Now, would there be a couple other things that I'd love that were way more expensive? Yeah, I do. But those are the reasons for those technologies. Not just, they started by a problem that we wanted to solve, and we wanted to make that an efficient part and parcel of their program. Training program, testing, training, testing, if that makes sense. Trying to simplify.
Of course. You got to do in this day and age.
Well, I appreciate your time. Anything else any other wisdom that you can give us? You had some notes I know you want to write down. Any other wisdom for the young coaches or older coaches?
I have written down here, people are people. Respect goes a long way. Body language is, when you're working in a foreign country, body language is a big thing.
It speaks louder than your mouth sometimes, doesn't it?
This is something I often come back to, because over here I get a lot of, that's how we always did it. So the most dangerous phrase in our language is, we've always done it this way, because I see a lot of is emulating what they were doing in the Soviet days, and I just can't help but think, like, I know Tarasov was way ahead of his time, but would he have changed some of the things he'd done if he knew what we know now? So, for instance, they have things like these. Back in the day, they used to do things like it's called a zaratka. They would wake up at like 7:30 in the morning and do a 5 kilometer run, or do some kind of like 30 minutes of conditioning in the morning, and then eat breakfast, and then go have a practice, and then have lunch, rest, and then have another evening practice. So, like, and other things like, if you can give me something called a gorodok. I still really don't understand what they're looking for, but if I had to describe, it's kind of like high intensity circuit training, but like done with really dangerous exercises and really like bad technique.
Yep.
And just trying to kill the players.
Yep.
And I always ask, well, why? And it's, well, that's how we did it back in the day. Well, what if you did was wrong?
That's another thing too, I think is interesting. I think, most of the people that I've been lucky enough to interview, including yourself, are all those kind of people, almost like Socratic questioners. Why? Why? The goal, obviously, is that eventually someone will respond with a really good explanation, right? Like, hey, this is why we did it, X, Y, and you're like, oh my, I get that, right? That's a really good explanation. If the explanation is because we always did that, that's a pretty poor one. Common practice doesn't always mean best practice. Might be how I say it. But I appreciate your time today, my friend. I really mean it. It means a lot. Safe travels back to the homeland. One of a kind. The first person I will get, was it Matthias? I am going to get him on the podcast. I'm going to get him on
He's in Utica. I think he's the head guy in Utica right now.
I will get him on the podcast based on your reference. But our guest today has been Brandon Bovee. Brandon, I appreciate you. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on, Anthony. Take care. Have a good one.